Hey, what is up, guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Social Primate Podcast. Today we have the one and only. We've had him before on the podcast before, the great Leslie Lau. He's the author of Pulling Weeds, Folding Laundry, a book that just recently dropped last month. What's up, dude?
What's up, man? Thanks for having me again. It's really good to be back.
Hey, no, likewise. I'm telling you what, as soon as you popped on the screen, I was like, yes, it feels nice to kind of, we can't be physically next to each other, but I can still see you and we can still kind of connect.
Mm, mm. No, it's really good to see you again, man. It's we always have good conversations, so this one I'm sure will be no different.
I know since the last time I had you on the podcast, you've gone through your own turmoil, your own growth, and up until recently, like I mentioned, you just dropped a book. Do you mind giving us or our listeners a little bit of more info on what that book is about?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, thanks for again the platform and allowing me to speak about my book. Like you said, Eddie, my book Pulling Weeds, Folding Laundry just dropped probably about a month ago now, and really, it's kind of like a culmination of a pretty long journey that I've taken that was sparked maybe about 10 years ago, actually, when I got diagnosed with cancer. And I think we spoke about this a little bit on our first discussion on your
Hmm.
podcast. And, you know, I feel like the book kind of was published and released in a very opportune period of my life. Like you said, a lot of kind of turmoil and just navigating, you know, my own personal perceived hardships in life, and that doesn't I say personal and I say perceived very, very consciously, just because I think that hardships is kind of a term that can be construed and interpreted as something that everyone sees on an equal value basis. For example, when I talk about cancer, for example, someone will often say to me, "Oh, I went through some tough times, but I can't compare with, what you went
Yeah.
through," stuff like that. But I think that, when I say it's a personal and perceived hardship, it's something that, one feels difficulty in moving through in their experience of it, you know.
Yeah.
Even if you have a really tough time, moving through, something like a broken toe or something like this, it can comparably, be as tough as how I went through or moved through my cancer process, or vice versa. There is no comparison in these things. So this is kind of a very strong theme and something that I want to uphold through the entire book itself. I wanted to really speak from my own personal experience and really just dissect that as a kind of reflection and just an understanding of it for myself, as to what it was that I went through, why it was difficult for me, and in the end, how I was able to find a sense of peace, contentment, and even joy through all of those moments. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's what the book really is about. We can touch on some specifics if you like. I'm happy to go whichever direction you want, man.
Yeah. I mean, for sure, I wanted to kind of talk on, I like that you touched the base on like the personal perceivedness of what you're experiencing. Like, I think it's really hard sometimes because, you hear stories of people like, they're either going through loss or they're going through like these hard times in their life. And a lot of the time people want to express themselves and they just want somebody to listen to them. And then as
Mm,
a person listening, it's hard sometimes to be able to relate because again, you can't necessarily put yourselves in their pain or in their situation. So it's really hard to kind of like really fully understand what they're going through. But you're still trying to, I don't know if the right word is sympathize with
mm,
them in a sense to the level of which you can kind of compare your situation with, if that makes any sense. But
totally.
that's always been a little trip on, honestly, because some people think like, hey, you can never be in my shoes, so you can never understand me. But like, how can we help each other if that mentality exists? Like, hey, just because I'm not in your shoes doesn't mean that I can't understand what you're doing or
Mm,
feeling.
mm, mm. Yeah, I think it's important to really note that. And I kind of felt like when I was writing the book, it was something that I found very important. Just to, like I say again, really be conscious of where it was that I was writing from, which perspective,
Hmm.
I wanted to be very conscious of writing from my own perspective and not be at the same time directive or prescriptive about what I was writing.
Yeah.
This book is not about uh, instructing anyone on how to do anything. This is simply about how I did it, through
Yeah.
my own deep dive self-analysis throughout not only just the last 10 years, but also my entire life in general. So I talk about, navigating hardships, but like, I think we've all moved through and navigated hardships throughout our entire lives, regardless of whether we had, good, bad, or neutral upbringings. I think there's always some sort of difficulty that we will encounter through life. And a
Hmm.
simple example for me that I talk about in the book is kind of my upbringing and being raised in Australia in a Caucasian country, and being basically the only Asian in throughout my entire schooling years, and that 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 challenge of misidentification of who I was and how I didn't uh, physically and aesthetically fit in with everyone around me and things like this. This is in itself a hardship that I faced. Maybe
Hmm.
someone else would have not found it so difficult. But yes, this is for me something that was part of my story, and again something that I was able to look back upon and simply take some lessons from. And I think again, it's important for me at least to look at things through that lens because it allows you to just, uh, at the simplest sense of it, just be someone, just be human in the sense that I'm saying that, like you said, you use the word sympathize and empathize, and I think that's perfect because that's all we can do in the greatest sense of things. I can't see through your eyes, but I know that you are moving through the human experience, as am I. And
Yes.
as difficult as I know that is, I know that it is also challenging for you as well. And I think that is enough for us to sympathize and empathize and connect and just say, okay, you're moving through some shit. I've moved through some shit as well. I may not know how to fix it for you, but I'm here for you to support you if I can.
Yeah, I love that. I was recently watching this video on this YouTube channel called School of Life, and it was just
Mm,
saying how kind of like trying to find the meaning behind the smallest things in this video. And what it was referring to was just saying like how talking to a stranger sometimes, like small talk, right? People are like, oh, I hate small talk. I don't like small talk. By it's fair by all means. Sometimes it is boring, not gonna lie, but occasionally if you allow yourself to just kind of open up, right? Like the idea of this or the concept of the video was saying that if you allow yourself to open up to strangers, even if it's just for 1 minute, right? You're just brushing each other's lives for that fucking minute in that experience. Like find a way to kind of humanize it and relate it, right? Like their example was like, a mom and a kid struggling to put the zipper up. And something like easy, instead of just kind of ignoring it, would being like, hey, like, well, they really make those really hard for people, don't they? Like something that just
mm,
kind of connects you in the sense that, hey, I can relate to your experience right now. Like, this is a human moment, right? Not like just like
mm,
blow it off and kind of walk away. But it's like
mm,
trying to
mm.
capture those moments in every single time and or every single aspect of your day, in a sense.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that, even the title of my book kind of points to that in a little sense, right? I kind of say, and I capture a quote in the book that I write is like, this book really is about, how I was able to find a real sense of, contentment with life in general as a whole through the most menial and seemingly mundane of tasks and actions like pulling weeds and folding laundry. Um, those are the things that have been profoundly, enlightening to me. It wasn't the big things, it wasn't those massive aha moments or anything like this.
Yeah.
It was simply me, in a garden of a Zen Buddhist monastery, pulling weeds and like remembering having like the sorest back from, bending over for 3 hours straight and, just folding laundry, folding towels at the monastery and folding towels at home and things like this, you know. And like you say, I think that there is relativity in any human experience because simply because the fact that another human was able to experience it and see something that way. And that's why I say again, perspective uh, in this book is important to me because a lot of people close to me have always commented that I see things a little bit differently. And I take that as a compliment, right? Whether that it is or not. Um, because if I'm able to simply share how it is that I see something and someone is willing to read about it and think about it a little bit, it might help them in just simply understanding that, they too could possibly see things in a different way. They don't necessarily have to see it the same way as I do, but they don't have to see it the same way as everyone else does either, you know? Like I'll give you an example, which something was like, it was truly touching to me when I heard this feedback. So um, my niece, who is barely 10 years old, her parents bought a copy of my book. And through one way or another, they had like a little um, in-family lottery to see who would read the book first. And
Hmm.
my niece won. So she was reading the book. She's like I said, she's barely 10 years old. And some of the feedback that, her parents have given to me, the kind of questions that she's asking because of some of the things I said. So very early on in the book, I said that cancer has been and is always going to be the greatest blessing of my life. And she asked her parents why that is. Why did he say that?
Hmm.
You know? And it really touched me that she was simply willing to ask the question and be curious about that because it is obviously very different to how everyone else, or most people, generally speaking, would think about this disease called cancer, you
Yeah.
know?
I totally get you because in a sense, again, this and since we're speaking on perspective, this is my perspective and opinion, but the idea of cancer, right? Like to me, it sounds scary, and I'm sure to most other people it sounds, just with that same fear. And for me, it's the unknown, not knowing, like, first of all, what kind of cancer, will it be curable, will it not be curable? Like, what am I gonna go through? The chemo, like all this other weight that is associated with that word. And recently, just somebody that I know from afar type of deal, I noticed that they got it sick. And then I found out that they have a type of cancer. And you know, just seeing your body degrade because of this illness, right? Or because it's trying to fight it off because you're trying to survive. It's heartbreaking. It's difficult to see and to just kind of digest. And it honestly it gives you that moment of mortality, and you seem
Mm,
weak and small and powerless, and it's really hard to kind of have to deal with that, and more especially if you're the person going through those challenges. Um so to me, that's why I asked you earlier, like, is there anything that you feel uncomfortable asking, or just having asked to yourself? Because
mm,
I feel like, just, hey, what was your experience with cancer is already heavy in itself, right? And
mm,
sometimes a lot of people are afraid to know because they don't want to know the answers of where they might be at with that.
mm. Yeah, and I can completely relate to and understand most people's feelings surrounding that. And I was no different when I reflect back upon my journey early on, when I was initially diagnosed. And again, I was diagnosed 10 years ago this year. So it's quite a milestone and a nice time, full circle kind of moment for the book to kind of be released on the 10-year anniversary of the diagnosis. But when I was diagnosed 10 years ago, I I remember wanting to, simply grit my teeth and bear it. and kind of just run through the process, if you will, just like any kind of um, very normal and modern way of kind of getting through something that is tough, you know. I'll just grit my teeth and I'll bear it for the period, which was, you know, 7 months, and I'll go back to normal and I'll forget about it, you know.
Mhm.
I'll go back to normal, my life pre-cancer, and I'll forget about it. But in that, I was kind of just afraid of what it was and what it was taking away from me in terms of the life that I had before the diagnosis, you know. And, you know, it took me a very long time to come to terms with the fact that there is no normal to return to, you know.
Mhm.
It did take me a very long time, and the way I the reason I bring this up is because, uh, like I say, my initial response and reaction was simply to ignore it and get it over and done with and turn it into a distant memory, um, so that I can resume my life and not have this kind of negative blip in my life that affected me and made me afraid of what it is that was going to happen and if there was going to be a tomorrow and things like this, you know. But yeah, like I said, it took me a very long time to um, come to terms with the fact that life was not going to be um, anything like it was before the cancer. And this is really why it was the greatest blessing for me, because uh, when I look back at my life before I had cancer, if I wasn't going to die by the disease, I was going to die by my lifestyle, you know, and the way that I lived and the way that I saw my life. So, um, in a sense, you know, the one of the most scariest and most um, mortalistic and, you know, human killing diseases that we have ever known in the modern world is what saved my life, you know. So it's a crazy thing.
That is crazy because I mean, it's like we mentioned, it's one of those things that are scary, but in the sense, in your perception or in your experience at least, it saved you, like you said, it
Mm,
allowed you to really change your life because otherwise you would have, like you say, you would have been on the same path down that self-destructive, based on your self-destructive habits.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, for sure. You know, and I talk about this a lot, you know, in the book itself, and
Mhm.
you know, and it's just crazy, like where I was at and how, you know, uh, how normal and regular I thought, you know, my life was back at that time. I knew something was wrong.
Mhm.
I knew something was wrong deep down in my gut, but I always say that I was never courageous enough to face it. And that's why, you know, drugs and alcohol and all those types of escapes that we so readily use in modern society were the things that I kind of turned to. Um, but yeah, it truly changed my life for the better, and I wouldn't be the person I am today without having been diagnosed with it. And you know, the courage that it gave me, really. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Now, when you were, once you started, actually, before I get to that, like during this process, like what was your mindset like? Like, what were you going through in terms of trying to heal yourself mentally, while you were going through this physical change?
You mean the treatment process during the cancer
Yeah,
treatment?
correct.
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, it was the same kind of mentality, really. I was doing everything I could to just distract myself from it, really, you know, because it was so in your face. It was difficult to ignore, because so many things were changing physically for me,
Mhm.
and there was so much pain and all of that type of thing. It was difficult to ignore, but all I did was, you know, try my best to simply ignore it. And you know, one thing that I really kind of look back on and am kind of proud of the way that I saw it back then even was I still had that kind of one day at a time mentality. Um, Even though I was trying to rush through it, I still looked at it and took it one day at a time because there was nothing more that I could do. life had slowed down to a grinding halt, like, you know how it is in, modern society. Life is such a blur. We rush around for everything. And, being in, corporate, high-flying corporate, um, uh, having like a very successful corporate career at that time, it was like kind of tenfold for me, everything was about getting shit done and doing as much as possible, and and doing a little bit extra than that, and then drowning it out with drugs and alcohol and partying and all that sort of stuff, right? So to not have work for 7 or 8 months and then simply have to stay home and focus on recovering from my cancer treatment. It was tough. It was like, but it was also something that saved me, because again, it slowed me down and it forced me
Hmm.
to look at things in a different light. But like I said, I was able to take things one day at a time. But at the same time, I was kind of trying to distract myself with
Yeah.
anything I could. But yeah, that's how I kind of moved through it, with a very clear hope of, that end date of my treatment process, and just very eagerly looking forward to the road to recovery and a return to some sense of normalcy, a life pre-cancer. So that was kind of, the kind of emotions that I moved through whilst I was taking it. But, I looked back, funnily enough, a few days ago or a few weeks ago, maybe, at some of the photos that I took of myself,
Yeah.
and even like, the treatment centers and things like this, just of around the time when I was accepting treatment. And the the small number of photos that I took really is representative of how I felt about myself in that whole process. That
Yeah.
I took no more than, 6 or 7 photos throughout that whole period of time. And I kind of, when I look back and kind of question why, it's kind of reflective of how I felt about it. I just didn't want to, keep relics of it. I wanted to ignore it, I wanted to suppress it. I just wanted to get it through it. And like I said, return to some sense of normalcy.
Damn, that is honestly, that is a crazy like way to see it. Like you said, like you take these photos, but so only a small amount of photos that it's enough for you because, like you said, you want to kind of just don't, how do I say, like pretend it never really happened type of deal. And
Yep.
that's a powerful way to see it because, especially in modern times, photographs are a way of capturing moments and capturing memories and capturing these fucking things that happen throughout your life. And for you
Mm.
not to want to do it, that speaks volumes.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah, that was something that really stuck out to me, because I was looking for something like, I was looking for some photos in particular, just to show parts of like the journey, just milestones and things
Hmm.
like this, and I could hardly find any. Um, and like I said, it was just funny to look back at and just realize that that's how I felt back then. I just did not want to, you know, keep any kind of tangible memory of this time in my life. And that's how I felt at the time. I just wanted to run through it. I just wanted to do everything that I could just to um, get it over and done with,
Hmm.
and live my life.
That's so crazy. Again, like that's something I can't ever, at least as of right now, I can't speak about or fully understand, but just the thought, like the idea of having to go through that and just having to fucking figure it out and just adapt to what's going on is like immense. But
Mm,
you say you're 10 years at this point since then, and like you said, since then it's just changed the course of your life. And it looks like even now you're still coming to these new conclusions or these new moments in your life where you're still trying to navigate and continue to improve yourself.
every day, every day. And I think, that's something that I've kind of come to over the years, arrived at a kind of attitude towards my life. I've kind of become very at peace with the fact that I don't really know much about um, what my life is all about. You know, when you're, it's kind of like, um, if I kind of frame my life as the question of, you know, what is it all about? What is the meaning and things like this? It's that there isn't anything profound about it, you know, but I know that, you know, right now that at the same time, that would have been something that would have terrified me in terms of just standing in this kind of unknown and not having a plan or a path forward, so to speak. I'm very content in it right now, you know. I'm very at peace with the fact that I don't really know, you know, intellectually at least, what it is that I'm going to be doing next. You know, there is no next for me really. I kind of just express myself the way that I feel I need to express myself.
Mhm.
And for me, as an artist, that is really the most fulfilling thing that I've ever experienced in my life. You know, I have not felt more fulfilled in my life than I do today, and I will say it again tomorrow. You know, um, and it's not about anything that I own or anything that I do or don't do. It's really just my ability to, you know, connect with the fact that I have something to say, something to express through some sort of medium, whether it's word, whether it's through paintings, um, whatever it is. And I'll try my best to do that. And I trust that it sort of just guides me in the right way, um, that I need to go, you know. And that for me has been the greatest compass because, again, I think we all just kind of are searching to find some sense of, you know, alignment and comfort and peace with our lives, you know. That's what, you know, people think that riches will give them and, you know,
Mhm.
status and notoriety and all these things, or enables them to do that at least, or enables them to explore that. Um, but I feel like I'm kind of there, you know, right now. And I don't need anything more in my life than what I'm doing right now, which is something that I could never have imagined, um, or a place that I would never have imagined being, you know, 10 years ago when I was, you know, running around like a headless chicken trying to climb up the corporate ranks, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that's just, the reality is that that is a lot of us, a lot of us are still in that position where you were just a couple of years ago, working, dealing with it, and then just finding a way to kind of sedate ourselves in the in between. Um, Unfortunately, I don't know, this is just me, but I feel like sometimes it's hard to get through those changes unless you're going through like this moment in your life that really just kind of shakes you up and says like, "Hey, wake the fuck up. This is happening."
Mm-hmm.
And then
Mm-hmm.
that's when you're like open to like, I need a change. Like there is behaviors that I have or habits or situations that I put myself in that have put me in this position, and now it's up to me to get out of this. And a lot of us are still there sometimes.
Yeah, for sure, man, for sure. And like I say, I think um, cancer was exactly that thing for me. It really was the catalyst to affect some change in me. And I think that, you know, now I could look back and I can see like there's always a choice in the matter in my mind, you know,
Mhm.
like in terms of how these things are approached, right? So when I look back and I talk about the fact that I kind of had some sense in my body, I felt, you know, for a very long time in my life that something was amiss, something was wrong, you know. In the Matrix, the Morpheus, you know, describes it as a splinter in your mind, you know, and you can't quite grasp what it is. And I love that way of like, you know, speaking about it because that's exactly what I had. And I was like, okay, I can look at this if I want, but I didn't want to because it scared the shit out of me, right?
Yeah.
Whatever I would find, you know, when I started digging. So I left it and ignored it, ignored it, ignored it until cancer popped up and said, you know, you can't fucking ignore it now, can you? You know, and that's what it was for me. right? And now on this 10-year journey to this point, I look back at the things that I've done. Everything that I do now, I'm actively looking for those things in my life and putting myself in positions to
Hmm.
face those things. And I'm completely comfortable in those situations now. And I kind of feel like this is part of the story of an artist in terms of simply finding his message, understanding what it is that he inherently needs to say that is like in his DNA, right?
Hmm.
What is that message? And how do I uncover it and then understand it in a way that I can then interpret it through the medium of word, through the medium of paintings, whatever, you know? That's kind of what I do now, um, in a very non-practical sense. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Dude, that's so powerful because it may not be in the same, in the balance of things, but like I've been recently just thinking about like, I don't know, this may sound a little egotistic about just talking about my podcast, but like I haven't felt fulfilled with anything else in a long while. Like
Mm,
just being able to talk with people, communicate, just have these conversations, connect. Like that to me feels so full. It makes my heart full. Like it really makes my
mm,
heart full. Like just conversation, not even like the likes, the follows. Like no, like it's the people. Like when I'm talking to somebody in face to face, I feel this fucking thing that just this attraction to just life, to feeling
mm,
grateful to experience, and I don't know what it is about it, but I don't know. I feel like we'll all find our calling, whatever in whatever creative outlet it takes you to, and it doesn't even have to be air quotes creative. It can be whatever it is for you. But
mm,
I think once you find that, like it gives you the new spark to just fucking do
totally.
things differently.
Mm, absolutely. And I think that like you say, the way that you're describing it, you can just notice that energetically you're different. You're speaking about it differently. Your eyes open just a little bit more, there's a bit more volume and depth in the words and how you express them. And that should be kind of a little bit of an indicator to us as ourselves. We should notice that and say, oh, why do I speak about this a
Hmm.
little bit differently than I speak about everything else? And it doesn't need to, again, quote unquote, make sense necessarily, right? Like, for goodness sake, I write words and make it into a book, and then I paint pictures. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it means nothing to most people, but for me, like, it is the essence of my personal growth in terms of
Hmm.
who I am as a person and continual discovery of what it is that I need to say. And what I need to say, it doesn't necessarily need an audience. I just need to say it for myself. And I trust that, again, we come back to this idea of like a very like generic and um, inherent connectedness that is like we're all humans. I trust that someone will relate to what I have to say, whether it's one person, two people, a million people, it doesn't matter. I know that someone will relate in some way with something that I'm trying to say, with something that I'm trying to express. And that for me is enough, because what I'm expressing is pure human experience from an experienced human experience, nothing
Yeah.
more, nothing less. I'm not trying to do anything more than just tell a story.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, somebody will find it, somebody will relate to it, and it's enough for them to say, "Hey, this is the thing that I was looking for, and this is what's
Exactly.
gonna make that little small shift, small but still a shift in whatever it is their path is." And that is what's really cool. Sometimes I think I read somewhere or I heard it like I'm paraphrasing this completely wrong, but it's something along the words of saying like people will forget how what you said, but they won't forget how you made them feel. So kind of like the
Mm,
power of words. Like you may not remember exactly word by word what this was meant to say or what it was trying to tell you, but you're gonna remember the way it made you feel, and that usually attaches the message to it.
totally. Totally. And I call that kind of just our like the essence of what it is that you're trying to convey, whether it is through words or whether it's through painting and things like this. I think it makes more practical sense when explaining it, or using the metaphor of a painting, right? Paintings aren't words, and we don't really quote unquote understand intellectually like what is going on in a painting. But I feel
Mhm.
like what draws people in isn't so much what's on the surface or the colors that are used, or the lines and the way that the strokes are done and things like this, right? It's the whole you know coalescence of all the elements and why all those things are used, and what is the essence that is trying to be conveyed through these methods, right? And I think words and intellect and things like this, we're not going to always connect with those things because we are kind of selective, and limited in what we can quote unquote consume, through our minds. But in terms of our humanness and the connectedness of who we are as people living in the same time period in human history, um, everyone can relate in some way, shape, or form to some degree. Um, it just is like everyone is the same in some sense, from a human level. So yeah, there's
Mhm.
that essence that that I at least am trying to capture through, whether it is, as I say, through the books that I write or the paintings that I paint. So
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly, through your form of expressions. Um,
that's right.
for to go back to the title of your book, specifically pulling weeds and folding laundry, like it seems like that's completely like literal from your life. I think you mentioned that's I think in your bio or somewhere that you kind of pulled literal that title literally from the stuff that you would do on your life.
Mm.
Tell me a little bit about how those moments allowed you to kind of, you know, have enough time to kind of like meditate on things.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I think the book title itself, like I say, it's very simple, and is very literal in terms of like what it is that it represents. But I think in essence, it's about all of these types of moments and experiences
Hmm.
that we have. But I think a large part of it, of my book and the experience that I write from, and where really this particular book was born in terms of its idea, was when I was staying in a Zen Buddhist temple in Japan. So I lived there for about 15 days, and lived the monastic life. And, just my physically taking myself away from my life here to that kind of setting, to that kind of environment, it already gave me the physical space that I needed, that and enabled me to kind
Mm.
of see in a very different light. Like you step into, and most people can relate with this, I imagine. You step away from, your hustle and bustle of everyday life and get away for the weekend into nature, go into a forest or something like this. If you stop and just notice for, and be a little bit more aware, dial up your awareness by 1 point, it'll feel different. You'll immediately feel different. You won't know necessarily why, but it will feel different, right? And to me, that difference was palpable because I firstly intentionally took myself away from life to seek this space, um, so that I can feel that space and have that space. It's because I didn't have all that external stimulus hitting me from
Hmm.
every single corner of my life. I didn't have a phone, I didn't have internet, and it didn't bother me at all. It was very, I actually enjoyed it quite a lot. And the simplicity of the life that I lived, wake up at 5, meditate for 3 hours, have some tea, work in the gardens for like 3 4 hours, have some lunch, have a bit of a break, have dinner, and then meditate before sleep for another 2 hours. That was my day for 15 days, very simple. I didn't have to overthink anything. And I was just there to experience what it was that was in front of me. And I think
Yeah.
that contextually is all important to my kind of coming to these realizations for myself whilst I was in there. It was kind of impossible for me not to have these kind of epiphanies for myself. Because the pulling weeds one, it's part of the service that we do to the temple as as a token of giving back. When we are offered accommodation there, we stay there, but we give back by doing work on the property.
Hmm.
And I felt like when I was there, weeding was like just this thing that we had to do if the monk was kind of like, oh, there's not much to do, so just send these guys out and fucking
Pull
pull
the weeds.
weeds, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, because it was like literally in the mountains, right? So there was like infinity fucking weeds out there.
Yeah.
Um, and I was just like, this was 7 or 8 days in, and I'd done weeding for that many days. I'm just like,
Hmm.
fuck, this is like killing my life. Bending over every day for like 2, 3 hours and just pulling weeds with these like shitty hand tools and putting them into a bucket for no reason, really. And, I kind of just came to the realization that, there's a real enjoyment in that as well, in this kind of weird sense that we're not given the opportunity to kind of feel. Is that like I kind of just felt a very abstract kind of beauty in those moments after having done it and hating it for like 7 days straight. And it was the same thing for like folding laundry. Like personally, I really like laundry. I like
Yeah.
doing laundry, the whole experience of it, right? I always have. um but doing it there as well, it was just like this picturesque beautiful setting, and I won't ruin it for you because I described it so beautifully in the book. But it was kind of like that whole moment I capture it and I'm like, this is art. It was so beautiful.
Hmm.
If I could bottle it, like it would be art, and no one could tell me any different. And when you break it down into a very simplistic and practical way, I was just folding towels and putting them back in into the
That's
closet,
so crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But like I say, it really just opened my eyes to our ability to be able to appreciate life at a different level and depth, you
Hmm.
know, if only we allow ourselves to and give ourselves the space to, and if we're aware enough to do that on a day-to-day basis.
Do you have any like advice for people like, for busy people who are just up and down every day, like in terms of how they can approach and finding these type of moments for themselves?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in between the business, you can always find some downtime. Like if I look back at my life in corporate, you're always going to have moments of respite from running around if you're, say, for example, commuting from your home to your office. Like I used to catch a train to work every day. So I had about 35 minutes when I was physically not moving, I was sitting. And instead of, listening to something that is kind of just a background or white noise for myself or something that is distracting, I pulled out a book, you know, and I was conscious about reading my book just in those 35 minutes, you know. And that's when I kind of really just started to get back into reading again, really. And
Mhm.
now, I consume, 30 to 40 books a year, Um, and, you go home again, everyone has to clean their dishes after a meal, for example. And again, you can rush through that and being very unconscious about that and think about this or that and talk to your partner or your kids and just kind of go through the motions with what you're doing. Or you can just simply give yourself the time. You're already there. You're already going to do them. What's the difference with doing your dishes whilst having 17 other things going on mentally and around you versus simply being there to wash the dishes, and what will you notice? And how, well, it's interesting how the water, you know, sounds a little bit different when it hits the back of the spoon and the spoon makes the water splay out and then splash up in a different, direction. And if you listen close enough, you can hear the kind of crackling of the soap, that you're using to
Yeah.
wash the dishes. It's just amazing at the things that you will miss if you don't simply give it the attention that you could, And again, it's all a choice, right? And I understand it's everything to me is easier said than done. I always say that, right? But I also say that at the same time, we have to start somewhere. And it comes back to this attitude of like one step at a time type of a process, you know, one day at a time. Um, it is a choice whether you want to see these activities a certain way or not. Um, and another one, everyone brushes their teeth every day, right?
Mhm.
You can just kind of unconsciously brush your teeth while you're thinking about something else, or you know, brushing your teeth and having a shower or taking a leak at the same time or whatever, right? You can do like multiple things at the same time.
Yeah.
But you can really, again, it could take the same amount of time, like chronological time, but you can feel so much different if you are consciously thinking about brushing your teeth and hitting the different parts of your mouth with the brush and how it feels a little bit different, you know, when the teeth meets the gums in the back left top side of your mouth versus the back bottom right side of your mouth, And it's not to say that, we notice it for any reason, just for the fact of noticing it, and
Hmm.
being able to then just experience something different and have a different lived experience of something that we think is the same every single day, which is in fact is different every single time, you know?
Yeah.
So that's something to think about, right?
No, for sure. Because you're like, yeah, this is the same thing. This is the same sound. Like, nah, it's not. It's all different. And like, kind of bringing back with like I know I've heard arguments before with people who are like about meditation. They're like, well, what do you mean you got to pay attention to your breath? Well, it's similar. It's like, but you put in a different example. It's like brushing your teeth. You're in the act. You're aware of the act itself. Like that's what you're focused on. Not like looking at yourself like, oh, I forgot to pick up my kid or like something, like some
Mm,
external thought that's just crossing your mind. It's about
totally.
just hyper focusing on that moment and just being there.
Yeah. I mean, for me, that's what meditation has taught me because, um, you know, like I shared this with you, I believe in the first time we spoke, is that kind of mm, when I was diagnosed with cancer, I was introduced with meditation to kind of help me manage anxiety and stress and things like this. Um, and of course, I understood meditation the same way that most people understand it. Oh, just sit there and count your breaths or just be still and whatever. It's kind of like a quote unquote health or wellness hack, right?
Hmm.
But the same way that I continue to explore it and I haven't stopped for 10 years, right? And I've explored it in so many different ways that I've finally found the way that I, quote unquote, understand and interpret and experience meditation. Meditation to me is life now, Like I don't need to necessarily sit down and be cross-legged and close my eyes and say oh and anything like
Yeah.
this, right? I don't need to do any of that. Like I can be meditative right now, and I am trying to be meditative right now, and that is the practice of life. And that's what it's taught me, right? It's kind of like a graduation of what meditation can be for you, is that it simply shows you that you can see life in a different way through a different lens, one that is closer to your own than
Hmm.
than what someone else has kind of prescribed for you. And that's kind of just simply the goal for me personally, as a meditator, as someone who meditates daily, you know. Um, it is no longer some sort of wellness hack per se, right? It is not some sort of practice that you could learn through a 6-week course or something like this. it is a life commitment in terms
Hmm.
of how open you are to what is occurring inside and how you're reacting to what is going on outside, you know, um, and a kind of, you know, uh, a reconciliation of all these things and just trying to figure out what it all means, if anything, you know.
If anything, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I
Yeah,
think
I
that's
mean,
important.
yeah, for sure, because I mean, you still gotta be realistic about it in the sense too, like you gotta just live through it and just expect, you know, the best. At least that's what
Mm,
I think. That's how I go through.
totally.
But no, like one thing that I've been trying to apply myself or trying to apply to my life is just the ability of taking whatever situation I'm in and just saying, hey, this is my experience today. This is my experience, like whether I want to be there, whether I like to be there. It's an experience. I'm taking it a time as to grow for myself, to just live and just be able to say, hey, I did this, or I put up with this, or I completed this, just to know that I'm trying to fulfill as many parts of my own life for myself, for my own growth.
Mm,
And it's been a hectic ride. It's been a lot of I've been in a lot of in a lot of bad situations, a lot of good ones, but I've taken them all as experiences, just like as part of this human experience, right? And
mm,
it's been fun, man. It's been fun trying
yeah.
to reframe that.
Oh, totally. And I think that is the perfect way to kind of speak about it. Like, firstly, the reframe of it all, but the two words that you kind of use and I love, and I kind of, it paints the picture quite well, is the ride and how it can be fun, right?
Hmm.
Like, to me, I look at it this way, and I always look back and I think about, why were the things that I kind of were drawn to and gravitated to when I was young, but throughout my whole life, they're kind of like they're weird. Everyone would think that they're strange, that you would like, oh, you like that? Why don't you like the quote unquote good stuff? And the things I'm talking about is like kind of things that are kind of sad, things that are kind of scary, things that kind of have this tone of melancholy, you know.
Hmm.
Um, I can't say that, like they're quote unquote good experiences, but I feel positively and drawn towards them. And I think it's important to kind of have at least some sort of relationship with not just, the things that make you happy and feel good, but on the other side of the spectrum as well, because that is part of, like you say, the whole life
Yeah.
experience. When you talk about the ride, it's not like a straight line, is it? It's ups and downs all the time. And if you aren't able to kind of reframe the way that you look at this, then the only way that you can really cope with this crazy ride that is life, right? This crazy up and down where you don't really know when it's going to go all the way up, and you don't know when the highest point is, and you don't know when it's just going to crash down and how long you're going to be down there for until it shoots all the way up again, right?
Yeah.
The way that you deal with it is that you numb yourself and you create that straight line for yourself and you don't feel anything, right? But
Yeah.
it's all part of the life experience for me, good, bad, and everything in between, And to me, the more that I kind of experience that for myself, the more enriching life becomes, the more color I'm introducing to my life.
Yes. Yes, exactly. That's a beautiful way to put it. Like it just adds color. It makes your life more richer. Again, bad or good. Like it just makes you well-rounded. It at the end at the end of this crazy ride, when we're in that moment of fucking when we're about to pass on to the next part of this fucking weird experience, we can feel like I did it. I went through it. I felt it all. Like I was one with everything. And that I feel
Mm,
is when you feel like just a full embracement of love and you just fucking face on to the next part, whatever happens, whatever you believe, but I think that is what we all should kind of strive for. I would love to think that, that we all should strive for that feeling of fucking fulfillment in the smallest and the biggest parts of our life.
Totally. And I think, like we say, it's simple because it is life. It's all everything is part of it. Every experience is part of life. And I always kind of use this example, and it's kind of like me personally, it kind of makes a lot of sense because I don't deal well in the heat, and I don't know how you are in the heat, right? But
No.
um, if for people who don't deal well in the heat, it's so euphoric when return to a place or a space which is like iced out uh, with air conditioning,
But yeah,
right? You just like the feeling is so euphoric, and you're just like, oh, relief, right? But imagine, you know, and it's hard to imagine because we've experienced it before, but it's an interesting experiment of thought for oneself, is just to simply imagine in a world where you didn't have air conditioning, right? And it wasn't even a thing. Then the experience of, you know, the heat and how uncomfortable it is, it would again in turn be different because you don't know what the alternative is,
yeah.
right? Right? You don't know what the alternative is. So the way that you see it is inherently going to be different. So in that way, the more negative things that you experience and are able to, embrace, move through, process, and then come out the other side, the greater the good things in your life will seem through your life, you know? So it all kind of balances out.
Oh man, I love that. Leslie, thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation. It's every time
Of
I
course,
I
man.
talk with you or I hear you speak, it's always like, it feels like I had a meditation session, you know?
I'm glad, man. I'm glad. I really enjoyed it. Like I said, it's wonderful to see you and everything that you've been doing throughout the years and just witnessing from afar. I've just been, again, just observing the growth and the evolution of you as a person, and social primate as a thing in itself. And it's come a long way since the first time I encountered it. So big ups to you, man. And like I say, it's always a pleasure to speak with you and just chop it up, man.
Likewise, man. For people, if I definitely want them to find your book, what is the best way to reach you, buy the book, like all that good stuff?
Yeah, man. So you can get the book through my website. It's www.leslieklau.com. And I'm most active through Instagram, which is at Leslie K. Lau. So those are the two main places where you can sort of reach me. But yeah, feel free to drop me a message at any time if you'd like to just say good day. I'm open, and I'm pretty active on those things. So yeah, I'm relatively responsive. But any questions, just feel free to say hello.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you again for the conversation, and for the time. It's always a pleasure to speak with you, and I hope that anybody else listening right now also feels the same and just uses this information to just find a ways of just kind of making small shifts in their in their adventure, in this adventure, you know. So thank you again, Leslie, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day,
You too,
and
man. Peace.
we'll talk soon.
All right. Big love,
All right,
man.
take care, man.